fifth graders, and welcome to your math lesson for today. For today, please pay attention very, very, very closely. You will need your math resource binder. You will need your 5B. 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 5B workbook, paper, and pencil. And to just really drive the point home, 5B. 5B. Yes, that is right, fifth graders. In fifth grade, we do not necessarily go straight through all of 5A and all of 5B. We do some of 5A and then some of 5B and then back to some more 5A and then back to some more 5B. So we're going to be kind of bouncing back and forth. So you need to make sure 5B. Now, that doesn't mean we're done with 5A. That doesn't mean go throw it away or have a bonfire or make origami out of it. No, you need to keep the 5A, but you also, so as you're kind of switching, keep that 5A in a nice safe place. Get out your 5B and keep that in a nice safe place. You're going to need both of them, okay? So as you're pausing to get those things, make sure that you're getting the correct things. Broken record that I am, fifth graders. Again, we are still continuing to be doing some work with problems that will be something like what will show up on your next quarterly exam. So go ahead and pause as you find the product of 4,283 and 39. Fifth graders, hopefully you remembered that product. This is a word that means multiplication, okay? So you should have multiplied these two numbers, okay? So 9 times 3 is 27, carry the 2. 9 times 8 is 72, plus 2 is 74. 9 times 2 is 18, plus 7 is 25. 9 times 4 is 36, plus 2 is 38. Remember, we must have that 0 in order to show that we're multiplying now by 30, not 3, but by 30. So now we do our 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 8 is 24, carry that 2. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8. 3 times 4 is 12. Then we add, and when we add, we should have ended up with 167,037. How do we do, fifth graders? The big thing here is, yes, of course, we need to do careful work, remembering that 0, multiplying and adding carefully, but also remembering that product means multiplication, okay? Very much a problem like what might show up on an upcoming test. So fifth graders, we are moving into a decimals unit at this point, okay? We're going to be looking at decimals. So our objective for today is going to be introducing place value with decimals. Up to this point, our place value has been whole numbers. So we've talked about ones and tens and hundreds and thousands, etc. So now we're going to take a look at what place value means with regard to decimals. We're also then going to move on and be working on comparing decimals, okay? So first things first, we're going to take a look. This should be in your math resource binder. It actually might be behind a sheet that we're going to use later. You might see this first, expressing a decimal as a fraction, okay? And this is probably going to be behind that, but we're going to get that out. It'll be helpful for today's lesson to have that out in front of you, and then we're going to get into our textbook and beyond. So I'm going to flip you around, and we'll take a look at this place value together, place value sheet. All right. So as we're looking at this place value strip, we have our thousands, okay, and we see here, right, this is the thousands place. We have our hundreds, which is super, super dark, but there's the hundreds place, tens, and then ones. And then this is our decimal point. So everything after that is going to be related to decimal places. So this place here, 1 to the right of the decimal point, those are tenths. 2 to the right are hundredths. 3 to the right are thousandths. 4 to the right are 10,000ths. 5 to the right are 100,000ths. And then 6 to the right are millionths. This is a great reference point as we're working on our work today to be able to look back and check your place values here. So you should keep this handy out, keep your math resource binder open to this so that you can be working along with me. So we're going to move into our textbooks, 5th graders, specifically starting off on page 9 in your textbook. Okay, page 9 in your textbook. Okay, so we're going to work through this together. So part of what they're highlighting for you first and foremost is that we're looking at these place values and they're breaking up parts of a whole, right? So 1, if we're going to break it into tenths, 10 tenths is going to be equal to 1. And guys, this is really a good reminder that decimals are the same things as fractions, right? So we see here tenths. This is 1/10. So these are the same thing. 1/10 as a decimal is the same as 1/10 as a fraction, okay? And good to remember that if we said 10 tenths as a fraction, that's the same as a whole. So here we see, right? 10 tenths making up a whole. So this is really just highlighting the fact that fractions and decimals is just a different way of saying the same thing, okay? So now we have a tenth, which is made up of 10 hundredths. If we had 10 hundredths, that's going to make up 1/10. And again, if we're talking about finding equivalence, 1/100th equals 1/100th. Those are equal to one another. They're the same thing, okay? So as we're reading these, when we're reading decimals, we kind of just can ignore so we're focusing on what's to the right of the decimal place. And so we just read that number, which is, for instance, in this case, 1, and then we look and see what is the place value of the last digit, 1/100th. Or again here, we have 1, sorry, I said 1, this should be 1/10, and this is 1/100th, okay? So we look at that place value, that digit. Okay, so now we're going to take the parts that they've put together for us, and we're going to write this out. We're going to write a decimal for each of the following. So they show us a physical representation of this, and then they also write it out for us in words, okay? So 3 tenths and 5 hundredths. So we're going to just put those in the place. So if we look at our place values chart here, our tenths place is right here, except for it's not 1/10, there's 3 of them. So that means in the place that's right to the right of the decimal point, we're going to put 3. And again, hundredths is 2 over from our decimal point, so 3 tenths, 5 hundredths. This is how we'd write it. And now as we're looking at saying that, again, we look at this number, how would we say that regularly? 35. 35 what? 35 hundredths. That's how we say that number. Okay, part B is telling us 3 ones and 7 tenths. So again, looking at our place value chart, 3 ones, remember the decimal point goes right on the other side of the ones place, and 7 tenths. Remember, our place value chart shows us that tenths is 1 to the right of the decimal point, so 1 to the right, we write 7. And we'd say this, 3 and, the decimal point we say and, so 3 and 7 tenths is how we'd read that word. Good. Let's look at C. This one's a little tricky. We have to pay attention. So 2 ones, that's simple enough. We just write our 2 in the ones place and then we put our decimal point there, okay? But now it says 4 hundredths, not 4 tenths, right here, 4 hundredths. So if the next place value is the tenths place, we have to ask ourselves, how many tenths are there? And according to this, there are 0 tenths. So we have to put a 0 in that place value. This is our ones, this is our tenths, and they're telling us there are no tenths, so we should have a 0 there. And now the next place value, look at our chart, is hundredths, 2 over. How many hundredths are there? 4. So this number we would say 2 and 4 hundredths. Okay. Okay, we're continuing on to A. We'll do it over here. So, write a decimal for each of the following. Okay, so when we think about decimals, a good rule of thumb is that there should always be some digit in the ones place, and then we can't skip any place values as we go over. So some digit in the ones place means either the text tells us what the ones place is, or we have to assume it's a 0. So according to this, are there any ones? No. So we write 0 and our decimal point. And now we really have to go place value by place value, okay? Trying to make room for us so I can get as much in as possible. Place value by place value. So what comes after the ones place? The tenths place. Are there any tenths? No, so we have to put a 0. What comes next? Hundredths. Are there hundredths? Yeah, there's 2 hundredths, so we write 2. What comes next? Thousandths. Are there thousandths? Yep, there's 4 thousandths. Okay, so this is how we have to really start. We always start at least in the ones place, followed by a decimal point, and then go place value by place value. We can't skip. Okay, that comes down to making sure we're keeping track of the right place value. We can't skip. So if there's nothing being told there, then we have to put a 0 there. So how do we say this number? We read here, what is that number right there? 24. 24 what? So we see 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 24 thousandths is how we read that number. Okay, let's try B. So remember, we always start with the ones place at least. Sometimes we might get more than 1, but we have to start at least with the ones place. Are there any ones here? No, so we're going to write 0 followed by a decimal point. And remember, now we have to go place value by place value. What comes after ones? Tenths. Are there tenths? Yep, there's 3. Are there hundredths? That comes next. Yep, 1. Are there thousandths? Yeah, 5. And that's it. So that's how we'd write that. And how do we read this? First, we look at this. That number is 315. But it's not 315 1, it's 315 what? Thousandths. 315 thousandths. Good. Let's take a look at C. So we start with ones always. The ones place. Are there ones? Yeah, how many? 4. So in this case, we're going to write 4 followed by our decimal point. And then remember, we have to go place value by place value. So after ones comes tenths. Are there any tenths? No, so we write a 0. Are there any hundredths? No, so we write a 0. Are there any thousandths? Yeah, there's 2 thousandths. So how do we say this? 4 and 2 thousandths. Good, 5th graders. So hopefully as you guys are seeing this, you're seeing it. Yeah, we have to kind of follow a systematic process in order to make this work. Okay, let's take a look at 3. So we're looking at this number, which has, as it tells us, 2 tenths, no ones, 4 tenths, 3 hundredths, and 5 thousandths. And we see here it has 3 decimal places, 1, 2, 3. Now we're told that the digit 5 is in the thousandths place, and we're asked, what is its value? So basically, they're asking us to identify that the 5 is not equal to 5 ones, it's equal to 5 thousandths. So how do we write 5 thousandths? So we have to say there's 0 ones, 0 tenths, 0 hundredths, 5 thousandths. The digit 5 in the thousandths place, we'd say 5 thousandths. So that's how you'd answer part A. Part B then asks us, what is the value of all the other digits? So we have 1, 2, 3 other digits. So 2, it's not equal to 2, it's equal to what? 2 tens. So we write that as 20. 4 is not equal to 4 ones. It's equal to what? 4 what? You can look at your place value chart. 4 tenths. So we'd say the value of the 4 is 4 tenths. 3 is not equal to 3 ones. It's equal to 3 hundredths. So we have to make sure to have that 0 there for the tens place because we're trying to show the value there. So we'd say 3 hundredths. Okay. Okay. And then they kind of are describing again, how would we read this? We would read this as 20 and 435. And what is the place value there? Thousandths. Good, fifth graders. Okay, we're going to do some adding without doing the vertical algorithm. I don't want you to write this out vertically. I just want you to be able to kind of look at that and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. So we have to again refer to our place values. So for 4a, we're trying to add 1 what more? That's 1/100th. So we have to add 1/100th to the hundredths place here. What digit is in the hundredths place here? 2. So we have to add 1/100th to 2/100ths, which gets us 300ths. So when we add these together, we get 5 and 63 hundredths. Part B is asking us, what is 1/100th less? So we already figured out that 2 is in the hundredths place, so we have to subtract 1/100th from 2/100. So what is going to be 1 less? 5 and 61 hundredths. All right. I'd like you to try C and D, fifth graders. So pause and give those a try and then come on back and see how you did. So this place value, if you look at your place value chart, is the thousandths. We're adding 1,000th. So what digit is in the thousandths place here? You're 6. So we need to add 1 to 6. So we end up with 4 and 537 thousandths. How did we do? Hopefully that went okay. Now we're going to do 1 less. So we still need to subtract 1 from this 6. So we end up with 4 and 535 thousandths. Fifth graders, you're going to have homework and practice questions just like these. So if this is tricky for you, I encourage you to please come see me during office hours and work through these. Okay, so now we're being asked to fill in some missing numbers here. Okay, so what goes in the blank? So if we look here at 5a, we're trying to figure out how much more this number is than this number. And so we're really looking at the decimal. So how much more is it? Remember that we need to keep track of that decimal point. So we always should have a digit in the ones place, even if that digit is a 0, okay? So 0, decimal point. This number is greater by 148 thousandths, and we show that with our decimal point. Okay, this one's a little bit different, right? Because we go up through here. So we have our 2, 7, decimal point 1. So how much greater is it? You have to make sure to keep track of that decimal point. So yes, you're right that it's going to involve a 4 and an 8, but we have to make sure that we're showing the right amount. So remember, we always show a digit in the ones place. There already is a 1, so it's not greater by that much. So then we have our 48. So it's greater by 48 thousandths. Fifth graders, why don't you pause C and try it on your own? So as we're comparing fifth graders, we see 2 tens, 7 ones, 1 tenths, 4 eighths. 4 eighths, that's wrong. 4 hundredths. Our difference here comes with the 8, but 8 what? It's not 8 ones, it's not 8 tenths, it's not 8 hundredths, it's 8 thousandths. So we need to show that using a decimal point and zeros. So we have 0, decimal point 008, and that's how we show 8 thousandths. All right, fifth graders, we're going to build off of this with some addition. So we're trying to figure out what is missing, and again, the important part being place value. So we have to make sure that when we write this out in expanded form, that every non-zero digit is accounted for. Just like at the beginning of the year when we were writing things out in expanded form, we didn't write down non-zero digits, right? We only wrote down digits that included, we didn't write down 0 digits. We only wrote down non-zero digits, okay? So we start with 3. 3 what? 3 tens, which they've provided. We skip the 0. We don't have to keep track of a 0 in expanded form. So now we come to our blank, which is the 1. But 1 what? 1 what is it? Yeah, it's 1/10, which we show with our 0 and our decimal point. So we should write down 1/10 here, okay? And then they have 300ths and 4 thousandths. B, again, we go one at a time and we skip any zeros. So I see 4 ones, 4 ones. 5 tenths, 5 tenths. That's a 0, so we skip it when we're in expanded form. And now we get to this 6. 6 what though? So again, we start with our 1, then our decimal point, and then we have to fill in a 0 and a 0 to show that this is 6 thousandths. And if you were to line these up, you can see, right? The 6 is in the same place value here as it is here. All right, this one is a slight curveball, but you can do it. You'll see here, right? It has 23 thousandths. So what is the part that's missing from this picture? That's right, it's our 30. So we should have 30 there. All right, fifth graders, we are not quite done. We're going to go to page 11. I'm going to hopefully get this to focus. There we go. We are going to go to page 11, but we're going to focus on number 9 and how we compare decimals. So fifth graders, when we're comparing decimals, we don't focus on the length of the number, as in how many digits it has, right? Because as we look at these two numbers here, for instance, this has more digits, but that doesn't mean it's greater, okay? When it comes to decimals, it's slightly trickier. So we really have to just go kind of a step at a time. So 4 and 6/10 compared to 4 and 58/100. So we want to start at the beginning, at our ones place. Do we see a difference in our ones place? No, 4 and 4, 4 ones, 4 ones, those are equal. That's not going to get us anywhere yet. So we move over to our 10th place. Is there a difference? Yeah, there is. 6/10 is greater than 5/10. So we can stop there. We don't need to compare any further because 6/10 is greater than 5/10. But something that you could consider, fifth graders, is if it's 6/10, that means that there's 0 in the hundredths place. So 60 and 58, we know that 60 is greater than 58. So that's one way to consider it. Let's try B. 26 and 98/100 compared to 27 and 2/10. So fifth graders, again, we only have to go as far as we can until we see a difference in the numbers. Once the numbers are not the same, then we can make our comparison. So starting in our tens place, 2 10s and 2 10s, not different. 6 ones and 7 ones, that's different. 7 ones is greater than 6 ones. That's as far as we need to go. We know that we're going to say that this number is greater because 7 ones is greater than 6 ones. What comes after that is ultimately not important in this case because 26 is always going to be less than 27. 26 anything is going to be less than 27 anything. So we can just stop at that point, okay? Let's try C, and then I'm going to set you on your own. Well, I might do one more with you before I set you on your own. So again, we go place value at a time until we see a difference. 1 and 1, 1 1, and 1, 1. Those are the same. So we go to our tenths place. 1/10, 0/10. Which one is bigger? Yeah, 1/10. So we stop there. Ultimately, this becomes not important because the difference happened in our tenths place. But again, if it's helpful, compare 100 to 8. 100 is greater than 8. I changed my mind. I'll do one more with you, and then I'm going to have you pause and try it on your own. Oh, I'm copying this down wrong. All right, we go place value at a time. So 6 and 6 equal. 3/10, 3/10 equal. 200s, 200s equal. So where is the difference? In our thousandths place. 8 thousandths is greater than 5 thousandths. So fifth graders, I would like you to pause, try E and F, come on back and see how you did. So as you're comparing these numbers, again, we go place value at a time until we see a difference. 1/10 in both cases, no difference. 2 1s, no difference. Tenths, there is a difference. And 4/10 is greater than 3/10. So again, we basically can ignore what's left. Or think about it by adding a 0. 439 is bigger than 340. Again, 1/10 in each place. 5 1s, 0/10. 4/100 is greater than 0/100. Or if we're comparing 40 to 4. How'd you do, fifth graders? Again, this is your checkpoint. If you're feeling like, ooh, I don't know if that went very well, that's your cue. Reach out, visit office hours, ask for help, okay? We can work through some more practice before you get to those practice problems. So pay attention to what I'm going to say next because your homework is not in your workbook. Your practice is in your workbook. I really want to make sure. Which also, this is in your instructions, but I want you to be super clear. So for practice today, you have your workbook. It's going to be workbook, page, and again, by workbook, I mean 5B workbook. So workbook, page 5. That's exciting to see. And then also on to page 6. But on page 6, only numbers 1 through 2. So all of workbook page 5 for your practice. Page 2, only 1 and 2. And this is your 5B workbook. So maybe you want to circle those problems on page 6 to make sure you're really clear. Okay. I wouldn't cross out 3 because that's something we'll come back to later. Your homework is attached to this assignment. Okay. Your homework is going to be a sheet with problems, and you can do them on any piece of paper and submit a picture. Okay. Okay. Again, with the practice, if that's tricky, that's another great time to come ask for help, fifth graders. Again, we're here. We're ready to help you. Just reach out. Okay. Good luck. Can't wait to see your work.